Hey guys, welcome back. So in this video today, we're going to be going over what venture capital is. This is an asset class that has helped make some of the world's most renowned startups like your Facebooks and your Airbnbs and your Oracles. But first, who am I to be giving you an overview like this? Well, I'm very early in my career, but I am X3X Capital, which is a Web3 venture capital firm. Alumni of the Venture Institute, one of the largest entities that spits out thousands of venture capital firms per year. That's led by Elon Musk, old roommate, shout out to the GOAT, DL Ressi. And I've done a little bit of operating time in a startup of my own. So with that being said, going over to the meat and the potatoes of the video. Now, venture capital is an asset class where essentially you're giving capital to a very young startup with a calculated and strategic bet that it's going to become a larger public startup later on down the line. Now, this is a long-term game that we're talking about here. This is a lot different than your loans and your grants and your other types of backers because there's a lot of other things that kind of goes with it, right? So a venture capital firm can provide founders expertise, because a lot of venture capitalists are prior founders and other things like that. And of course, the venture capitalist has a fiduciary responsibility because they have investors called limited partners that they owe money back to as well after a liquidity event or anything like that. We're talking about 4 or 5 years down the line and other things like that. But let's back up, right? Let's go to a little bit of history. Now, how did venture capital become a thing? Well, we can go all the way back to Great Britain, and venture capital actually started, back in the 1600s when people were giving money to the Mayflower to go fund an expedition to come back with treasure, and they would normally get larger returns to the people that they lent money to than they initially paid into the vessel. So that is essentially a big picture idea of what venture capital became into. Now let's talk about the 1950s in America. It kind of just blew up as an asset class because there was one company that gave a well over 300x return. And now fast forwarding all the way back to more recent times, a lot of your big name venture capital firms have put money into companies like Facebook, into Airbnb, into Google, most recently Instacart, and all these other things. So what makes venture capital different than just taking out a loan or doing anything like that? Well, if we look at the structure of a venture capital firm, you got your management companies, see this cool graphic up here. You have your limited partners, and then you have this entity in between in the middle, which is the general partner. Now, what makes this kind of different, right, is that since this is a partnership per se, when they invest into a startup, they hold it as a portfolio company for however long the terms. Now, because of this, you're working side by side, and normally the investor's trying to get a minority stake into the startup so they can have a seat on the board to help influence decisions to push progress forward. Now, I think that's what the big difference is in regards to how it can help founders. Now, how it's different on the financial side, well, there's a little bit of a hoop going into because you have a lot of venture capital firms that get quote unquote paid into to take these investors' money, which are known as limited partners, and invest them into startups. Now, like I said previously in the beginning of the video, you have to pay your investors back, preferably with a larger return than what you paid into, in order to keep raising larger funds and others like this. So to wrap all this up, this is what you call the power law, right? Because the raw reality of all of this is that 9 out of 10 startups fail. But out of a large portfolio of companies, one of these companies are going to hit it so large that it returns your whole venture capital fund. And that's the principle that venture capital goes. Now, I'm not going to say that you live by the sword, you die by the sword, but it's a very risky asset class. But then at the same time, a lot of the biggest companies in the world have repaid their funds many times over. And then you've had those long enduring relationships and all this other stuff. Now, to keep this into retrospective, there's no indicator saying that you have to take venture capital funding in order to be successful. In fact, a lot of very renowned figures says don't ever take other people's money if you don't have to. A lot of people a lot of people bootstrap and operate it lean, but I just wanted to give you an overview of what venture capital was, and there's a whole lot more that goes into this type of stuff, but I just wanted to give you the 30,000 foot view. Now guys, if you like what I put on here, be sure to subscribe because we got more VC content coming in 2024.